All right, let's continue on our building on our schematic. We want to make this a functional circuit here in the long run. So I can see right away when I look at this, I have an op amp, an input resistor, feedback, output resistor, that's fine. But in the real world, I have to have a way to get signals in and out and power in and out. So we're going to continue on wiring. Let's go back to our components. And you see I have miscellaneous devices. Let's see if I look around in here. I have miscellaneous connectors. Very good. So I can put connectors on here. You'll see that here's a header, like a 10-pin header, 11-pin header. There's a lot of different headers um, because they come in all different sizes. A 2-pin header. So what will we need for an input? A 2-pin header will work for an input. So let's double-click the 2-pin header. If I use my space bar, I can rotate it, but maybe I want my input on pin 1 and ground on pin 2. Now I could wire it like this and have the ground come out the top. It's not going to look as good. Always remember, I'll probably say this more than once in these videos, your schematic is your artwork, and your project not only does it need to work, but it needs to be readable so anybody else versed in the art can look at this and understand what it is. So what I would do is take my connector here and say, yeah, for me, I always want my input on pin 1 and ground on pin 2. I'm going to hit the X key. And the X key, remember, will mirror my part. So now I have pin 1. I could hook right there. That'll work really well. All right, and up here I have my place ground power port on my toolbar. I could come here and place my ground. Look at that, I have ground. That works pretty well. Now on my output, I'm going to go back to components, and I'm still on my connectors. I have a B and C connector. Now the B and C connector is that round circular connector on the front of the oscilloscope. That's a connector that you take your part, your probe, what you're using, you push it on there and you rotate it and it locks in place. Maybe I want to have that from my output. I'm already driving my output as a 50 ohm load, so I'm going to put a B and C right over here. Now look, I got the same problem. I can rotate it and have my ground on the top, or I can rotate it back the way it started, hit the X key, and drag it right over. There we go. So now I have an input connector, an output connector. I get the same problem again. I have P question mark. If I don't change anything, Altium's going to assume that both of those connectors are the same part because they have the same annotation. It'd be like if I called them both P1. So the simple fix, don't ever forget to do it. I go to Tools and say Annotate Schematics Quietly. I just put 2 new parts. There we go. Now I have P1 and P2. You'll notice the name B and C here. I can highlight B and C and move it around to get it out of the way. Take my ground, stick it right on there. Boy, that looks a lot better. If I didn't do it that way and I tried to do it this other way, it would look like this. That would work and it would wire the circuit right, but it's not as readable, and why not fix it and make it correct? So here we go. And I can grab the B and C parameter again and move it up here so it's out of the way. That's not too bad. I can read that. I have an input resistor, feedback resistor, output resistor, op amp. I have my B and C connector on the output. Now if I wanted to, where my header is here, if I click on my header so it's highlighted and go to the properties, you'll see the comment says header. I can highlight that and say, I want to name that input. So now it says input, right? The text for that thing says input, doesn't just say header. I can do the same over here. I can highlight B and C if I want. If I click it twice, it highlights the whole set of text without even going to properties. Just hit delete and say output. So again, there's two different ways to do the same thing, right? I named it two different ways. If I highlight the part and go back to properties now, I can see it's called output here. If for some reason I didn't want that visible, you see that little eye right there? I can click that eye and look, it disappeared off my schematic. It still exists in the project, I just didn't make it visible. I can make it visible again, click the little eye so I can see it. Now, zooming in and out again, I can hold the control key, roll my scroll wheel to get in and out. If I get way out like that, I can tell it view the document. It puts the whole document there. I can tell it view fit all my objects, and it automatically scales it so I can see everything inside my window. Now we can see that I have an input and an output in this very simple circuit. I don't have power, and that's another thing we're going to want to put on here. So let's go back to our components. I'm going to find a 3-pin header. There we go. There's a 3-pin header. And you see I have header 3 and I have header 3H. They're going to have the same schematic symbol, but they're going to be a different shaped connector. So I'm going to place the H just so we can see the difference when we make the circuit board. I'll double click this guy. I'm going to rotate him and stick him up here. There we go. I right click to stop placing parts. I'm going to drag that text out of the way. I'm going to highlight the text, highlight it all at once, and call this power input. There we go. So it has a name. And I'm going to put a ground. Now here's one way to cheat. I'm going to put the ground there. And then I'm going to take my ground, grab it with my mouse, and drag it down. And look, it keeps the wire on it. Now I could have placed it. I'm going to highlight the wire and hit delete. It goes away. I could have placed my ground down there and just put a wire on it. That's easy too. There we go. Now I need to put some connections between, let's say, my VCC and negative VCC up here down to this IC. Few ways to do that. If I take my P1, I'm going to show you some different ways to do this, and I'm going to start off with my input. I'm going to take that guy and I'm going to drag him over and highlight just the wire. I'm going to delete the wire. So now my connector is no longer connected here. I'm going to show you another way to do that. And in this case, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's just one thing, but we want to learn how to place different items and how to use the tools. So I'm going to tell it I want to place a net label. So this is the last net label I used on a previous project, channel 4. You'll see it's on my mouse. It's moving around. If I want to change the property before I place it, and this is going to be common in many different things we do now, is hit the tab key before I place it, and it will stop placing and bring the properties up. So I hit the tab key. I can see now net name says CH4. Well, I don't want to call it CH4, so I'm going to call it INPUT, input, and hit enter. Now I'm placing this net name, and it's called input. I'm going to place it, and of course if I place it here, no red X, right? You know we need to place it right where that little plus symbol is at the end of the node. If I place it here, it looks good, but no connection. So I place it here, and I also want that same connection to be here. So what I would do here is place it, right click to stop placing, grab my input symbol, and just drag it out. You see it put a wire so that this symbol isn't sticking on side of R1 and the resistor. I want to make it readable. So now my demonstration shows that my input on pin 1 is still connected here. That means this piece, I can highlight it all at once, can be anywhere on my schematic page. Stick it up here somewhere if I want. My input still goes here, and I don't have a wire in the way. Sometimes when you get a lot of connections, it gets hard to read because of all the wires. All right, so I don't need it up there. I'm going to move it back down. Put it here. Now the reason I did that is because I want to put connections here. VCC going to these guys. Maybe it'll be +5 and -5, whatever I want to put there. So I'm going to come up here and say place a net label again. I'm going to hit tab so I get to the properties. Let's see, do I want net labels? No, I'm sorry, I'm making a mistake here. I'm going to escape. I don't want a net label there. I want to place a power port. It's going to be the same process again. I don't want to put ground. I want to put something else. So I want to change the properties. I'm going to hit tab. And I'm going to say the name is not going to be that. It's going to be plus 9 volts. And the style, nope, I don't want it to look like that. I want it to be a bar. That looks good. So after I've changed my net name, changed my style, there it is, plus 9 volts. So I'm going to stick it way over here. And I'm going to want that also to be here. Now, I could right click and stop placing, or I can hit tab and just edit the one that I'm placing. Because now I want a minus 9 volts. So I do that. I come here. Look at that. I can come here and place minus 9 volts. I can come down here and place minus 9 volts. Now, when I'm moving my schematic around, I may not have mentioned this yet. If I hold my right mouse button down, you see my pointer? It changes to a hand. I can now drag my schematic around. A lot of ways to get where I want to go. I can zoom in and out with control scroll wheel, and once I zoom there, I can right click and drag this around to get to the points I want to get to. Let's go ahead and wire this up. And we notice, look at this, it says P question mark. Let's just say I've been working on this project, adding and removing parts and modifying it until I'm happy with it. And this one ends up being P9. Well, that's okay, but now I have P1, P2, and P9. It's out of order. This is something we'll probably do more than once during these videos. So I can come to my tools and annotation and look, reset schematic designators. I want to reset them all. They're all question marks now. And I can go back to my tools and say annotate quietly. Confirm changes, 7, yes. And now I have P1, P2, and P3. So I got the things that were out of order fixed by doing that. I'll hit save all. I'll do a view, fit all objects. Let's see. Oh, look at there. I have a floating input. See that red squiggly line? It's even telling me, hey, you got a problem here, buddy. You need to do something. So let's put that guy to ground. I'll just wire him. There we go. He's wired up. So now I have an input connector. My net brings it across with the same net name. And be aware that the net names are also case sensitive. If I had a capital I for input and a lowercase I for input, it will not be the same net and it won't get wired across. So here I have my input, my resistor, right? Feedback resistor, output connector, power coming in. I've labeled things, inputs, output, power input. I think we're looking pretty good at this point for this section of the video. I want you guys to go ahead and implement these changes on your project. Let's take a look at it. If you make a mistake, that's okay, because that's how we all learn. As you see, I make mistakes all the time. The best part is you figure out what it is, you fix it, and you keep moving forward.